The classified presentation slides on my laptop screen had my name listed as primary technical architect, but they weren't my work. Someone had gutted 18 months of defense systems engineering and replaced it with commercial-grade garbage that wouldn't last 5 minutes in a real combat environment. I'm Nathan Crawford, 52 years old, and I've been building military communications systems for 26 years. Started as an Air Force electronics specialist right out of high school, spent 8 years learning how real defense systems work, then moved into the contractor world where they actually pay you what you're worth. I thought I understood how this business operated. Turns out, I was wrong about the people I trusted. The thumb drive sitting on my desk contained what was supposed to be my final presentation deck for the biggest contract of my career, a $340 million Department of Defense secure communications array. Instead, I was looking at a PowerPoint massacre. Every piece of proprietary technology I'd developed, every security protocol I'd engineered specifically for this system, every custom hardware specification that made our solution unique, gone. Replaced with off-the-shelf components and generic encryption that any first-year cybersecurity student could crack. And according to the metadata, this butchered version had been presented to the Pentagon yesterday, without me in the room, without my knowledge, without my authorization. Let me back up and explain how we got here. 20 months ago, Apex Defense Technologies won the initial contract bid for the Secure Forward Communications Initiative, or SFCI for short. The Army, Navy, and Air Force all needed a unified communications system that could operate in electronic warfare environments where traditional radio and satellite links get jammed to hell. Think Afghanistan on steroids, where the enemy has doctoral degrees in signal disruption instead of improvised explosive devices. I was brought in as senior systems architect because I'd built similar systems for Special Operations Command and the Defense Intelligence Agency. My security clearance is secret level with additional compartmentalized access for sensitive communications programs. In the defense world, that's like having a backstage pass to the really expensive concert. The technical requirements were brutal. The system had to maintain secure voice and data communications in environments with active jamming, electromagnetic pulse attacks, and cyber intrusion attempts. We needed frequency-hopping radios that could switch channels 1,000 times per second, mesh networking that could reroute around damaged nodes automatically, and encryption algorithms that would take the NSA's best computers about 500 years to crack. Standard commercial equipment? Not even close. We had to design everything from scratch, working with specialized manufacturers who hold security clearances and sign agreements that basically say they'll go to federal prison if they talk about what we're building. Madison Torres joined the project as VP of Business Development about 6 months in. She's 38, Stanford MBA, sharp enough to cut glass, and hungry for the kind of success that gets your photo in Defense News magazine. I'd seen her type before. Smart people who understand that defense contracts are where the real money lives, but don't always grasp that defense systems are where people's lives depend on getting the engineering right. I liked her initially. She asked good questions during technical briefings, took detailed notes, and seemed to understand that you can't rush federal compliance procedures. I started mentoring her on how defense procurement actually works, the difference between commercial sales cycles and federal acquisition regulations, why we spend 6 months on paperwork that seems redundant, how Pentagon decision-makers think differently than civilian executives. The project was going well. Our prototype testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground exceeded specifications. The Marine Corps Warfighting Laboratory wanted to fast-track field trials. Congressional oversight staffers were asking friendly questions instead of hostile ones, which in Washington means you're winning. Then 2 months ago, things started getting weird. Madison began scheduling meetings about presentation optimization and stakeholder messaging. She brought in consultants who specialized in translating technical complexity for executive audiences. Every time I explained why certain technical details couldn't be simplified without compromising accuracy, she'd nod and smile and schedule another meeting. She started asking questions about my contract terms, specifically about final approval authority for technical documentation. I'd negotiated Clause 12.3 into my executive agreement during the initial hiring process. No external release of classified technical material could happen without my written authorization. Standard protection for senior architects with my clearance level. Most companies hate these clauses because they give individual engineers veto power over business decisions. but Apex needed my specific expertise badly enough to agree. "Why do you need final approval anyway?" Madison asked during one of our weekly project reviews. "You're part of the team. We're all working toward the same goals." I explained that defense systems are different from commercial products. One wrong specification in a PowerPoint deck could lead to procurement decisions that get soldiers killed 5 years down the road. The Pentagon trusts individual engineers more than corporate presentations because engineers have to stake their professional reputations and security clearances on technical accuracy. She seemed to understand. Said she appreciated the mentoring and wanted to learn how to think like a defense systems professional. I thought we had a good working relationship based on mutual respect and shared commitment to getting this project right. Tuesday morning, October 15th, I walked into the office expecting to deliver the final presentation to our federal stakeholders. 18 months of engineering work, ready for production authorization and full contract funding. Tommy Rodriguez, my assistant and a former Marine sergeant who understands operational security, knocked on my door at 8:45 with a look on his face like he'd just witnessed a friendly fire incident. "Nathan," he said, not quite making eye contact, "Madison wants you to review the final presentation deck before the federal briefing." That should have been my second warning. The first was walking past Madison's office and seeing her on a conference call with someone, gesturing animatedly while looking at what appeared to be presentation slides on her monitor. She saw me walk by and quickly minimized her screen. In the defense world, when people start hiding screens during phone calls, someone's about to get compromised. "The presentation's scheduled for Conference Room Alpha at 9:30, Tommy continued. Madison said to use the final approved deck from the secure server. Conference Room Alpha is our SCIF, sensitive compartmented information facility, soundproof, electronically shielded, with security protocols that require two-person authorization just to power up the presentation equipment. When federal agencies want to review classified technical specifications, that's where it happens. The kind of room where multi-billion-dollar procurement decisions get made and careers either launch or crater." I checked my calendar. Nothing had changed. The presentation was still listed for 9:30 a.m. with attendees from the Pentagon's C4ISR Directorate, the Defense Information Systems Agency, and the Office of the Secretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. Heavy hitters, the kind of people who approve or kill major defense programs with a single PowerPoint review. "Tommy," I said, "pull up the latest version from the secure repository and verify the digital signatures. I want to make sure everything's properly validated before we brief flag officers." He nodded and headed back to his workstation. Former Marines understand the importance of checking your equipment before important missions. In this case, the equipment was 18 months of advanced engineering work that would either revolutionize military communications or get buried in procurement hell if we screwed up the presentation. I spent the next 30 minutes reviewing my technical notes one final time. The SFCI system wasn't just another radio upgrade. We'd developed 3 breakthrough technologies that would give U.S. forces a 10-year advantage over potential adversaries. First was adaptive frequency synthesis that could identify and avoid jamming in real time. Second was quantum-resistant encryption that would remain secure even against future computing advances. Third was mesh networking with artificial intelligence routing that could maintain communications even when 60% of network nodes were destroyed. Each of these technologies was covered by multiple patents, classified under international traffic in arms regulations, and considered sensitive enough that foreign nationals couldn't even see the block diagrams without State Department approval. The kind of engineering that keeps America's military competitive against countries with significantly larger armies. At 9:25, I walked toward Conference Room Alpha carrying my classified materials in a locked briefcase. The hallway felt normal. Colleagues heading to meetings, the usual Tuesday morning energy of a successful defense contractor with multiple federal contracts in progress. I passed 3 other project managers, 2 business development directors, and 1 of our security officers. Everyone looked busy and focused, the way people look when they're billing hours to important government clients. Conference Room Alpha was empty. Not just empty, completely dark with chairs pushed under the table and no presentation equipment powered up. The secure computer terminal was in sleep mode. The digital projector wasn't even plugged in. I checked my phone again. 9:28 a.m. No calendar updates, no messages, no indication that anything had changed. I tried calling Madison's direct line, straight to voicemail. That's when I heard footsteps in the hallway behind me. Madison Torres walked up carrying a coffee cup and wearing the kind of smile that never quite reaches your eyes. She looked relaxed, almost cheerful, like someone who'd just finished a successful presentation to important clients. "Nathan," she said, stretching my name out like she was savoring something. "Didn't Tommy tell you? We moved the presentation to yesterday afternoon. Went beautifully. The Pentagon folks were really impressed." I stared at her. "Yesterday? I didn't get any notification about schedule changes." "Oh, that's on me," she said, not looking particularly apologetic. "Last-minute request from the federal team. They had scheduling conflicts today, so we accommodated them. You know how it is with government clients? Flexibility is key." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a standard commercial thumb drive. Not a secure drive, not encrypted, just a regular piece of consumer electronics that you could buy at any office supply store. "Here's the deck we used," she said, handing it to me. "I figured you'd want to see how it went. We got preliminary approval for the next phase, and they're expediting the contract modification paperwork." I took the drive, feeling like I'd just been handed a live grenade with the pin already pulled. "This contains classified material?" "Cleared version," Madison said quickly. "We worked with legal to make sure everything was appropriately sanitized for the audience. You know how PowerPoint presentations go. Lots of technical detail that doesn't really translate to executive decision makers." That was my first real hint that something was seriously wrong. Defense presentations to federal agencies don't get sanitized. They get declassified through formal processes that take weeks or months and require approval from original classification authorities. You don't just delete sensitive material and call it cleared. That's how security violations happen and people lose their clearances. "Madison," I said carefully, "who authorized the technical modifications?" "Legal reviewed everything," she said. "Andrew Sterling signed off personally. We're all good from a compliance standpoint. Andrew Sterling is our general counsel, but he's not a technical person and he doesn't have the security clearance necessary to review classified specifications. More importantly, under Federal Acquisition Regulation, Part 15, and Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation. Supplement. Part 215. Technical changes to classified proposals require approval from the original technical authority, which in this case was me." Madison was either lying or fundamentally misunderstood how defense contracting works. Given her Stanford MBA and 6 months of mentoring from me, I was betting on lying. "I'll review this and get back to you," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Great," she said, already turning to walk away. The client feedback was really positive. They loved the streamlined approach. Streamlined. In defense contracting, that word usually means someone removed important technical details to make bad news look better. It's corporate speak, for we simplified this until it became wrong. I walked back to my office, locked the door, and plugged the thumb drive into my secure workstation. The file was titled SFCI Final Presentation V4 Approved. PPTX, a file name that violated about 4 different document control procedures and suggested this version had never been through proper technical review. I opened the presentation and immediately understood why Madison had been smiling. Someone had performed surgery on 18 months of my engineering work, and they'd used a rusty hacksaw instead of a scalpel. Slide 1, title page. My name was listed as Principal Technical Consultant instead of Senior Systems Architect. A small change that completely misrepresented my role and authority over the technical content. Slide 8, System Architecture Overview. My proprietary adaptive frequency synthesis algorithms had been replaced with a generic block diagram showing commercial frequency management. The breakthrough technology that would give U.S. forces a decisive advantage in electronic warfare environments had been reduced to off-the-shelf radio components that any adversary could analyze and defeat. Slide 14, Security Implementation. The quantum-resistant encryption protocols I'd spent 8 months developing were gone, replaced with industry-standard AES-256 encryption. That's like replacing a bank vault with a gym locker. Technically, both provide security, but only one will stop a determined adversary. AES-256 is fine for protecting credit card numbers, but it won't survive contact. With state-sponsored cyber warfare units armed with quantum computers. Slide 22, Network Resilience. The AI-driven mesh networking that could maintain communications with 60% node loss had been simplified to redundant communication pathways. No mention of the machine learning algorithms, no explanation of the adaptive routing protocols, nothing that would help Pentagon procurement officers understand why our system was worth $340 million instead of the $50 million they could spend on conventional equipment. But the worst part wasn't what they'd removed, It was what they'd added. Slide 31 contained a technical specification that was completely wrong. Madison's team had listed our maximum data transmission rate as 10 megabits per second in contested electromagnetic environments. The actual specification was 2.4 megabits per second under worst-case jamming conditions. They'd inflated the performance numbers by more than 400%, creating expectations that our system could never meet in real combat situations. When soldiers discover that their communications equipment doesn't work as advertised during actual firefights, people die. When Pentagon oversight committees discover that contractors provided false technical specifications, people go to federal prison. I scrolled to the signature page. No technical authorization from me, no security classification markings, no ITAR export control notices. The document looked like a commercial product brochure instead of a classified defense system specification. Madison Torres had taken 18 months of cutting-edge military engineering, stripped out everything that made it valuable, inflated the performance claims, and presented it to the Pentagon as my approved design. She'd committed technical fraud against the Department of Defense while using my name and reputation as cover. I opened my contract file and turned to Clause 12.3. The language was precise and unambiguous. No external distribution of classified or controlled technical material shall be considered authorized without A. Written approval from the designated technical authority, B. Proper security classification markings, and C. Compliance with applicable federal regulations including ITAR, EAR, and CFR Title 48. Absence of these requirements renders said material unauthorized and subject to immediate recall enforcement. Madison had just triggered my kill switch, and she'd done it while committing federal contract fraud. I pulled up the original presentation file from our secure repository and ran a metadata comparison. The unauthorized version had been created at 4:17 p.m. on Monday, October 14th, less than 18 hours before the Pentagon briefing. Someone had worked late into the night gutting my technical specifications and replacing them with commercial marketing copy. The digital signature showed the last editor as mtorres@apexdefense.com. Madison hadn't just bypassed my approval authority, she'd personally deleted classified technical information and replaced it with false specifications. Under Title 18 U.S.C. Section 1341, that constituted mail fraud. Under Title 10 U.S.C. Section 2324, it constituted contractor fraud against the Department of Defense. Under Executive Order 1-958, it constituted mishandling of classified information. I spent the next hour documenting everything. Screenshots of the unauthorized presentation, metadata showing who made the changes and when, side-by-side comparison of the correct specifications versus the fraudulent versions, digital fingerprints proving that classified technical information had been improperly modified and distributed to federal agencies without proper authorization. At 11:45 a.m., I composed an email to Lisa Washington, our federal compliance officer. Lisa is a former Defense Contract Management Agency auditor who understands that federal contracting violations aren't internal HR issues. They're potential criminal matters that require immediate notification to government oversight authorities. Subject line, urgent, Clause 12.3, enforcement required, unauthorized technical material distribution. Body, Lisa, I've discovered that classified technical specifications for the SFCI program were modified and distributed to federal agencies without proper authorization. The attached documentation shows violations of federal contracting regulations, ITR export controls, and security classification procedures. Per Clause 12.3 of my executive agreement, I'm requesting immediate compliance review and enforcement action. Time sensitive due to ongoing federal procurement activities. Attachments. Original authorized presentation, unauthorized version used in briefing, metadata comparison report, regulatory compliance checklist showing multiple violations. I hit send at 11:52 a.m. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I leaned back in my chair and relaxed. Because the machine was now in motion and Madison Torres had no idea what was coming, the federal government doesn't move quickly on most things, but it responds very fast when defense contractors might be committing fraud. By 1:30 p.m., my secure phone was ringing. The caller ID showed DoD OIG, Department of Defense Office of Inspector General. Mr. Crawford, this is Special Agent Sarah Palmer with the Defense Criminal Investigative Service. We've received information regarding potential contractor fraud related to the SFCI program. Are you available for an immediate interview? The Defense Criminal Investigative Service is the Pentagon's version of the FBI. When they call, it means someone is about to have a very bad day. Yes, ma'am, I said. I can be available immediately. We'll be at your facility within 2 hours. Please secure all relevant documentation and notify your legal counsel that federal investigators will be conducting interviews. I hung up and checked my watch. 1:34 p.m. In less than 26 hours, Madison's unauthorized presentation had triggered a federal criminal investigation. The Pentagon doesn't mess around when contractors provide false technical information for multi-hundred-million-dollar defense programs. I called Tommy Rodriguez. Get Andrew Sterling on the phone immediately. Tell him federal investigators are inbound and we need legal counsel standing by within 2 hours. Federal investigators? Tommy's voice went tight. Former Marines recognized the sound of incoming artillery. DCIS. Someone's about to have a very bad day, and it's not going to be us. I gathered all my documentation, locked it in my security cabinet, and started preparing for what would either be the most satisfying conversation of my career or the beginning of a very long legal battle. Either way, Madison Torres was about to learn why defense contractors don't commit fraud against the Pentagon. At 3:20 p.m., 2 black sedans pulled into our parking lot. Federal investigators don't drive flashy cars, but they don't try to hide either. When the Defense Criminal Investigative Service shows up at your facility, everyone knows why they're there. Special Agent Palmer turned out to be exactly what you'd expect from someone who investigates federal contractor fraud for a living. Mid-40s, sharp suit, the kind of direct eye contact that says she's heard every lie in the book and won't waste time on new ones. Her partner, Special Agent Rodriguez, looked like he'd spent time in the military before joining DCIS. They both carried the quiet authority that comes from having federal arrest powers. Mr. Crawford, Agent Palmer said after we'd settled into conference room beta, we understand you've identified potential irregularities in the SFCI program documentation. I walked them through everything. The unauthorized presentation, the modified technical specifications, the inflated performance claims, the missing security markings. I showed them the metadata proving when the changes were made and by whom. I explained how proper federal contracting procedures had been bypassed and why the false technical information posed serious risks to military personnel who would depend on this equipment in combat situations. Agent Rodriguez took notes while Agent Palmer asked detailed questions about classification procedures, technical approval authorities, and federal acquisition regulations. These weren't casual inquiries. They were building a case file. Mr. Crawford, Agent Palmer said after reviewing my documentation, in your professional opinion, did Ms. Torres understand that modifying classified technical specifications without proper authorization constitutes a federal crime? I spent 6 months mentoring her specifically on defense contracting procedures, I replied. She attended multiple briefings on ITAR compliance, security classification requirements, and federal acquisition regulations. She knew exactly what she was doing. Agent Rodriguez looked up from his notes. Where is Ms. Torres now? She called in sick this morning, I said. Hasn't been seen since yesterday's unauthorized presentation. The agents exchanged glances. People who commit federal crimes often develop sudden illnesses when investigators start asking questions. While the DCIS interview was happening, word was spreading through Apex Defense like wildfire. Federal investigators in the building meant serious trouble for someone, and everyone was trying to figure out who. I saw colleagues whispering in hallways, checking their phones for news updates, and generally looking like people who work for a company that might be under federal investigation. At 4:15 p.m., my secure phone rang again. This time it was the Pentagon's C4ISR Directorate, the same people who'd received Madison's fraudulent presentation. Mr. Crawford, this is Colonel Martinez from the C4ISR Systems Integration Office. We need to discuss some discrepancies we've identified in yesterday's SFCI technical briefing. Colonel Martinez explained that Pentagon engineers had been reviewing the presentation materials and discovered performance specifications that didn't match previous technical submissions. When they tried to contact Madison for clarification, they'd been told she was unavailable. Now they were questioning whether the entire presentation had been properly authorized. Sir, I said, I can confirm that yesterday's presentation was not authorized by me as Senior Systems Architect. The technical specifications were modified without proper approval, and some performance claims appear to be inaccurate. There was a long pause. Mr. Crawford, are you saying that Apex Defense provided false technical information to the Department of Defense? I'm saying that someone at Apex Defense modified classified technical specifications without proper authorization and presented the modified version to federal agencies. I've already notified our compliance officer and cooperated with DCIS investigators. Another pause. We'll be suspending all SFCI contract activities pending investigation. Please consider this official notification that the Department of Defense is reviewing Apex Defense Technologies for potential contractor fraud. By 5 p.m., the entire $340 million contract was on hold. Every aspect of the SFCI program, prototype testing, production planning, delivery schedules, frozen until federal investigators could determine whether Apex Defense had intentionally provided false information to Pentagon procurement officers. Madison Torres finally showed up at 5:30 p.m., walking into the office like nothing had happened. She made it exactly 14 minutes before Andrew Sterling, our general counsel, intercepted her and escorted her to conference room Alpha for what he diplomatically called an urgent legal consultation. I was reviewing technical documentation at my desk when I heard raised voices from conference room Alpha, not shouting exactly, but the kind of intense conversation that happens when lawyers explain federal criminal liability to people who thought they were just being creative with PowerPoint presentations. At 6:45 p.m., Madison emerged from conference room Alpha looking like she'd aged 10 years in 75 minutes. Her face was pale, her hands were shaking, and she had the expression of someone who'd just been told their career was over. She tried to stop by my office on her way out. I was busy reviewing federal acquisition regulations and didn't look up. "Nathan," she said from my doorway, voice barely above a whisper, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." I finally glanced up. "No misunderstanding, Madison. You modified classified technical specifications without authorization. You provided false performance claims to federal agencies. You signed my name to systems I hadn't approved. The only misunderstanding was thinking you could commit federal contractor fraud without consequences." She opened her mouth to say something else, then apparently thought better of it. Smart move. There wasn't anything left to say that wouldn't make her legal situation worse. Madison Torres was terminated the next morning, not repositioned, not given a chance to explain, not offered a severance package. Terminated for cause due to violations of federal contracting regulations, with immediate effect and permanent notation in her personnel file that would follow her to any future defense industry employment. 3 days later, I got a call from Patriot Systems Defense, the largest contractor in Northern Virginia. They'd heard about the compliance irregularities at Apex Defense and were interested in discussing new opportunities with someone who had a reputation for doing federal contracting the right way. It turns out that when you have 26 years of experience building defense systems and a track record of putting technical integrity above corporate politics, people notice. Especially when your previous employer just got flagged by the Pentagon for contractor fraud. I accepted Patriot's offer the following week. Chief Technology Officer, Advanced Communications Division. Full technical authority over all classified programs. No interference from business development executives who think federal regulations are suggestions. 6 months later, the Department of Defense awarded the SFCI contract to Patriot Systems, specifically requesting that Nathan Crawford serve as Senior Systems Architect. The contract value had increased to $420 million due to enhanced technical requirements that I'd recommended based on lessons learned from the Apex Defense debacle. Madison Torres? Last I heard, she was working for a commercial software company in Seattle, developing mobile apps for consumer markets. Apparently, no defense contractor in the Washington, D.C. area wanted to hire someone with federal compliance violations in their background check. I never spoke to Madison again after that conversation in my office doorway. Didn't need to. She'd taught me something valuable about the difference between ambition and integrity. Ambitious people want success fast. People with integrity understand that real success comes from doing difficult work correctly, even when nobody's watching, especially when nobody's watching. The truth is, I didn't destroy Madison Torres's career. She destroyed it herself the moment she decided that federal regulations didn't apply to her personal advancement goals. I just made sure the right people knew about it before she could compromise national security or get soldiers killed with defective communications equipment. And sometimes, that's the most important thing you can do.